We certainly have a quorum. Marks two things off. What's your pleasure on the minutes?
Hello, let's see.
Welcome this evening. We have a quorum, and I'd like a motion on the minutes of last month's meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Motion's made, is there a second?
Second.
Any question or discussion? All in favor, make it known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We're gonna have update on the agenda. You want to speak to that, Brady?
Sure, I think our mic volume's down, so just give me a second. Let me see if I can get that mic. Give it a try now.
Hello, can you hear me? No, I'm still not getting anything.
Try it now.
Nothing. Someone had it.
Just on desktop.
Test it.
Dexter, is there a speaker on that table behind you?
TV back in.
Yeah.
It's a little bit.
Is it on now?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I think we covered the first business. Did you want to update the agenda for the night?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Some things came in this afternoon.
Yes, sir. Yep. Dutch Gap Gas and Grill, which is the second item under new business. It was a rezoning for property located on Dunn Street to rezone it from R1 to Planned Community District. They have withdrawn their application as of today at noon. Based on the comments that were received from VDOT on Thursday of last week, they've decided to complete a required traffic impact statement. That process could take anywhere from 60 to 90 days. And upon completion of that traffic impact statement, they then plan to reapply. So
Okay.
it will be coming back before you all probably sometime in early summer, I'd say maybe June at the earliest, maybe July, depending on how long this process takes for the traffic impact statement.
All right, thank you. Is that the only one that,
Yes, sir. That's the only one. So everything else on the agenda is as written.
okay. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business. This is the Hunter Price LLC. We tabled it twice. We've got to make a decision tonight. Because we can only hold it for 60 days before we turn it over to board supervisors. You want to speak to it?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As last month's meeting, the Planning Commission recommended deferral or decided to defer their recommendation rather until the comments from VDOT had been received on the updated proposed entrance. As you recall, at the January meeting, this item was heard and the proposed entrance, if you're looking at the map from this direction, was more on the left side of the property along where the county's sewer easement runs. At the February meeting, they had amended the application to include a proposed entrance more on the right side of the property. Compass wise, it's actually the north side of the property, but the way this image is, I have it laid out here. It'd be the right side of the property. That VDOT's comments came in regarding that proposed change this past week as well. VDOT stated that they cannot support the proposed location of the commercial entrance as currently presented, as it does not comply with the requirements of access management regulations. Particularly, it's due to its offset nature from Dunn Street and its distance to the functional area of that intersection. I will say both rezoning cases that you will hear tonight, we do have Adam Wilkerson from VDOT present. So if you guys have any direct questions for VDOT, he can speak to those on either this one or the one that you'll hear later this evening. However, with this proposed entrance using that 50-foot easement, VDOT, stated, as I mentioned, they could not support it. Now, there is this dispute over whether or not there's a reserved road there. The applicant did work with an attorney, and that attorney, based on the deed information that he reviewed, did submit a letter speaking in that he believes his client does have ability to access either all or a portion of the existing roadway that is there. That applicant, Ed Rogerville and Miss Shelby Rogerville, are both here this evening as well. If you had any direct questions for them, that Dunn Street extension, I've done a lot of looking through myself in terms of working with the applicant and his information, working with Miss Clark, who's an adjoining property owner. And at some point it was laid out, but what sort of has been the dispute is whether or not it was granted to the county, conveyed to the county, or if it was, the size of it. And Mr. Rogerville's attorney submitted a statement believing that the 1916 deed was, in essence, a conveyance of that portion of the street to the county. If that portion was included, VDOT still has some concerns, and Mr. Wilkerson can speak to that, as it's still the commercial entrance for the proposed apartments would not align exactly with the Dunn Street side. So with that being said, it's been a process of getting to this point. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer. If you have any questions for Mr. Wilkerson, I know he'd be glad to answer as well, and the applicant's also here tonight.
Will Mr. Wilkerson come forward and speak to this? Is he here?
Yes.
Good evening.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
Thank you, sir.
In other words, we assume it's not coming in a straight angle, it's offset, right?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Anyone else have any questions concerning that? That's kind of what we thought the last meeting from what we've heard. Anyone else have any question? So even with the letter from the attorney stating that would still put it offset.
So obviously our preference would be for a four-way intersection with Dunn Street.
I know.
If it is close enough to where it operates as a four-way intersection, even though there's a slight offset, I believe we could support that. However, once we get out of the direct intersection of Dunn Street and Virginia Street, our standards are pretty clear that we need to have enough spacing so that the maneuvers from the two streets have to operate as two independent three-way intersections.
So,
And the general spacing for that is the spacing for a left turn lane, which typically is 100 feet of storage and then 100 feet of a taper. So the standards would want a 200-foot separation.
all right. Anyone here?
I haven't looked at it if the easement is to the county or.
That is correct. So if they come back when they work out the easement and they can get it as close to a four-way intersection as possible, we'll be happy to review that and provide our comments.
Any other questions for him on this project?
So is currently by that map where they're showing the interest coming out, VDOT's not going to grant an interest.
We would not issue an entrance permit for that, no, sir.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else have any questions on that? Since we've already had a public hearing 3 months ago now, the next public hearing on this project will be with the Board of Supervisors. But if you have anything you'd like for us to keep for record to give to them, we'd be happy to take it from anyone in the audience. But anyone on the Planning Commission have any other comments? requests, motions?
I don't see how we can approve it if they can't get access to the property.
Well, you want to put that in form of a motion? That would be up to the board of supervisors at that time.
So they never got easement from the one closest to the road, I believe, correct?
The one down the stream.
The one down the hill, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see how we could rezone a piece of property if the access to it's gonna be denied for the intended use.
All right.
Well, the only yeah, I guess that's right, but I'm saying we couldn't okay it for the apartments. Later on, if somebody came in there for a single dwelling house, I guess that would be just an entrance. It would not be a major intersection, I guess you'd say.
That's true.
But their lawyer thinks that they do have access there, so it's kind of like a speak to me.
Well, it comes back to
So-
determine between the county. Did we get 50 foot, we get 10 foot, 16 foot? We did find where a lot of the older roads were only 16 foot right of ways in as compared to wider ones now. Any more comments? We gotta do something tonight, pass it on or. Really, with what we know,
I don't think we can.
we can't pass it on as approval.
Whatever we say, they got time to talk, maybe a little more information.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the board of supervisors got 120 days plus, like, to make their final decisions. Can I get a motion to deny it without enough information?
I'll make a motion to deny, does it? Can't get a commercial entrance the way it's presented.
Second.
Motion made and second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, make it known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. So it'd be passed on to the board of supervisors and hopefully the, Rogervilles can, and the county can come up with something as to what is that exact road frontage is on that part or roadway. That probably ought to be established anyway, in case we get another one to come to before us. All right, moving, any more old business anyone knows of? Moving on to new business. This is a public hearing on rezoning the Amelia County Economic Development Authority from an RR3 to an M1. The next one we'll do is the rezoning for the RR3 to the M1, the Amelia County Economic Development Authority.
Yes, sir, Mr.
The planning commission will talk. After we gotten our questions through, I'll open it for a public hearing. At that point, we'll let you come forward, state your name and address, and try not to be too awful long because you may have a lot of people behind you want to speak to. Brady, you want to bring it to the table?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I think these mics, it seems like you really got to speak
All right.
right into it. Is that correct? You guys can hear me pretty good when yeah. Okay. So, the applicant, as stated, the Amelia County Economic Development Authority is requesting a rezoning of tax parcels 40-62A, a portion of 40-63. Those two have been merged into one parcel, but a new map number has not yet been coded. 40-64 and 40-53B. The location of which is identified as being on the north side of US 360, which is Patrick Henry Highway, adjacent to Richardson Road, which is State Route 640. This property would be rezoned for the purpose of developing a commerce park similar to the project that was completed on the property off of Old River Drive behind the Food Lion Shopping Center. The Commerce Park will specifically be located on tax map 40-62A and portion of 40-63, which is approximately 132 acres. And I'll have a survey in this PowerPoint presentation that I'll show you of that area. The other two parcels The other 27 acres of the entire 159 acres that is before you this evening is owned by JGL LLC, who has permitted the EDA to include this additional 27 acres in the request. That's tax map 40-64 and 40-53B. The rezoning again would be to M1, which is our light industrial zoning, not M2, which is the heavy industrial zoning. The property is located near the landfill, and I'm going to show that in a second, and near Swift Creek Forest Products. So I'm going to show you some visual aids to help you guys see. Here's the survey of the property. It was 2 parcels. It's now been merged into one. Identified on the left side of that survey is a sort of rectangular piece that is owned by JGL LLC. That's 10 acres. And then directly south of that is their 27 acres. As you'll see, that 159 acres surrounds 2 parcels. The right up that abut 360, those are 2 small parcels. They're both currently under residential occupancy, meaning there's a house on each of those parcels. One of the parcels, the one on the left side, is actually zoned B1, which is a business zoning. It's my inference that at some time the property that was there was maybe occupied as a business use, and it's retained whenever the zoning map was made. That's often how they historically did it. They would put a zoning on a parcel of what the current use was. However, it's now being used as a rental residential property, and it's owned by JGL LLC, the property owner of the 2 parcels that's included in this request, along with the EDA property. The other one is another house. It's owned by Miss Shamika Harris. I've driven by it several times, haven't seen a car there. It doesn't look like it's a house that's in total disrepair, but I didn't see any activity driving by, so I'm not sure if there's someone living there or not. And when speaking with some individuals, I have heard that possibly the person that was there had passed and maybe no one's living there. So there are 2 residential properties there. This next slide is showing your GIS satellite imagery. And the conceptual site plan will show, but as you see, it's the old Emerson's area there right on 360 is sort of the center mark. And then the property surrounds that, the subject property. This shows you the zoning proximity of the property. Everything that's in royal blue, I'd say, is zoned RR3. That's the zoning of the property currently. It's rural residential. Everything that's in more of like the sky blue color is M2, and the parcels you see in red are M1. The yellow parcels are B1 properties. So in this area of Amelia, you see there's a lot of rural residential. There's also a lot of M2 property. This property, as mentioned, abuts the property owned by JGLLC, which is also owned by the same entity that owns the M2 piece on that same side of 360, which is Swift Creek Forest Products. So this area, if rezoned, would be red like the other 2 parcels you see. Just before I move forward, are there any questions just about the zoning map and the zoning proximity of the parcels?
That M1, is that the landfill? Or
So
is
that
the M2?
the M2 is the landfill area. And there's some other properties that are M2, and as you see, some business zone properties throughout that area. But the predominant M2 there is the landfill. Yes, sir. This is a FEMA flood map. If you see the areas that FEMA shows are flood zones, they run along some creeks through there. There's a road, the road that the middle flood portion you see, the road right to the left of that is Richardson Road. The creek does continue down. The FEMA map is not showing any flood area around it. I'm sure there is. I noticed that these areas have a red line And so what I'm assuming is that this has been an area that was a limit of study, meaning they haven't really charted that far down. FEMA hasn't. So I also looked into the U.S. National Wetlands Inventory. And you see the creeks running through. You see Richardson Road. Is everybody tracking? That green sort of kidney bean shaped section that's on the south side of Dusty Hill Lane to the west of Richardson Road, that is a registered freshwater forested shrub wetland according to the National Wetlands Inventory. So I would assume there's probably a little bit of flood zone through there, just for note. This is the proposed conceptual site plan that was completed by B&B Consultants. The conceptual site plan indicates that the property could possibly accommodate 12 commercial/industrial building sites. There is no water and sewer in this area, so any water would be provided by groundwater, and any sewer would be accessed through on-site septic systems. Of course, that's really going to limit the developability of it in terms of, any water heavy operations will likely not be able to develop there. And you could go through, I know you guys are very familiar with water heavy operations from dealing, with them in the county in the past or other localities. This is very conceptual. It's just really what it's showing from the consultant is the potential developable sites. The lay of the land is, definitely, it has some topographic changes to it. So you would see that the consultant was sort of working with the topography in terms of placing this. We'll get back to the entrances and the roadways as VDOT did provide comments. But I just want to note that before any development could occur, a comprehensive site plan would need to be submitted in addition to a subdivision application if it was the intent of the applicant to actually sell off the parcels and not build out the park all in one parcel. That's very similar to what the old park did. The old park was, a dozen or so parcels were created that then were sold off, or actually sold mainly to one entity that has then sold them off, and all of them have either been sold or spoken for to accommodate the businesses that that are now there. So this will require a site plan. That site plan is reviewed by staff to ensure any compliance with federal, state, and local codes. Not limited to, but focusing mostly on zoning, erosion and sediment, stormwater management, and then also would require that subdivision application with input from VDOT, the Department of Health, and staff on a litany of matters. So we did receive comments from VDOT for this project as well. VDOT recommends that a traffic impact statement be completed with a focus on access points, turn lanes, and the main crossover, which I'll go back to show you. If you can track my mouse cursor on the screen, there's a crossover proposed right here, or there's an existing crossover rather right here that would be utilized. That was a sort of a point of concern for VDOT due to the potential traffic having to utilize that to go back east on 360. Can you see my cursor right here? All right, well,
Right there.
Mr. Morris is pointing right to it. So there's a crossover existing on 360 right there. And that was a point of concern. As I get to the VDOT comments, that was a point of concern due to the traffic that may be utilizing that crossover due to the potential of this development. So and let me get my VDOT comments. So Patrick Henry Highway is the main roadway that's going to be serving this project. According to VDOT, accommodates or has a vehicle trips per day count of 14,000. Based on this conceptual site plan, since there's no like known uses, the way that VDOT does their calculation is through the total square footage that was proposed in terms of vehicle traffic. With that, they calculated a potential maximum of 4,220 vehicle trips per day, which that's based on the total square footage. That doesn't generate the 5,000 vehicle minimum where VDOT would require a formal traffic impact statement, but they do recommend a traffic impact statement, especially as the EDA, narrows down more of the prospective uses that would go on the property. From every meeting that I've been present with the Amelia County EDA, they really are hoping to develop this park similar to what they did at the previous park, which, as you all know, generates a lot less than that traffic a day. Something that we as staff would like to potentially do is do some traffic counting that goes into the current park to get an idea of how many vehicles are coming in and out over a period of time. The entrances as proposed in the site plan would all appear to comply with VDOT minimum requirements, but again, this is going to have to be submitted to them in a site plan, an official site plan, of course, before they would give final approval and grant an entrance any entrance permits. I could go through all the specifics in terms of each entrance and where they're located, but I think for right now, you guys saw the plan. You have a really good idea of what the conceptual idea is. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Brady?
No, looks to me like they would have been better off. They're gonna have to put turn lanes in on both lanes, but at each entrance. Looks to me like they'd be better off to use that one entrance to build one set of turn lanes and then have a frontage road that runs parallel 360 to access the east and west parts, rather than have to build 6 turn lanes. Be cheaper, I would think.
That has been mentioned in the EDA meetings in terms of just the best way to handle traffic coming off 360 and having a proposed interior roadway that would sort of funnel all traffic to there before the entrances has been discussed. Again, that plan is very conceptual. That's not at all showing that that's exactly what they would go forward and do. That's just showing that based on this rezoning, really with the topography of the property, what the property could be developed as, right? So that's sort of showing this is sort of how many sites you could fit, which is 12, with the potential rezoning.
Any other questions for Brady?
Do you have the uses in M1 light industrial? You ain't got to hit all of them, but some of the.
Yeah. So yes, sir, Mr. Phelps. The M1 district is our light industrial district. So we have an M2. The M1 is the light industrial, which is a district that is designed to permit certain industries, which do not in any way detract from residential desirability. The provisions specifically that would govern this, according to our ordinance as written, are related to height of building, horsepower, heating, controlling emissions of fumes, odors, and noise, landscaping, the number of persons employed, and hours of operation. And so the uses listed, that section and the words that I spoke come straight from the ordinance, are all uses that would really try to limit the 3 S's as much as possible, which is sight, sound, and smell. Whereas the M2 is like your landfill. Sight, sound, and smell are not limited. Examples of that could be any type of interior assembly or production, like any type of parts or clothing and apparel or optical goods, electronic equipment, toys, any type of interior manufacturing of baked goods, pottery and art goods, any interior molding, for example. There's a litany of other, like specific, like I'll list some of them. Boat building, book binding, cabinet and furniture shops, kiln drying, mini warehouse storage, a pulpwood yard, the service of farm, yard, and garden equipment, veterinary clinics or an animal hospital, wholesale or warehouse housing operations. Those are all your by right uses that they would have access to. There are a list of special exception uses. They're pretty limited. They include agriculture general, agriculture limited, agriculture intensive. They include beekeeping, portable sawmills and planing mills, which would only be allowed for timber on site. So if any timber was bringing off site, a portable sawmill would not be allowed. An industrial size laboratory. So not an asphalt plant or, a major paper manufacturer, nothing that would be huge amounts of sight, sound, and smell emission is permitted.
Most of the things inside the building.
It's very similar to the current, even though the current industrial park is zoned M2, it's very similar to the current uses that have located in the industrial park, where you have Borum's Heating and Air, for example, you have Keystone Vintage Lumber, you have you have the RV and boat storage facility, a number of uses that are, I think you have an athletic facility there, a number of uses that when you drive by, if it didn't have a sign, you wouldn't really know what was going on in there, is the way I describe the M1. Now, with that being said, if there was, if the rezoning was requested and the property was subdivided and someone wanted to buy a piece and they wanted to bring any use that wasn't in the M1 or that was a special exception, they would have to come back and apply for that special exception to get that use. Or if they wanted to try to rezone a parcel of it to M2, they'd have to apply, and that would all have to come back before the Planning Commission and back before the board, if there was anything like that.
Any more questions? Brady. Now I'm assuming, you had really 3 sites that were being joined to get the total change. The only parts that would be developed right now that we know of is the ones that would be owned by the Amelia County Economic Development, right?
Yes, sir.
The other one that's just connected, and they already have land that's already went M1. And if they ever expanded, they'd like to already have it as M1 so they could do that at that time.
Right. The current operation there mainly produces pallets, some mulching, wood chips. They do some lumber, I believe. But they had agreed to incorporate those 2 parcels because over time they may want to expand certain aspects of their operation, storage of certain equipment. There's elements about their operation that they couldn't construct on an M1 piece because it's M2 specific. But they could, right now, it's just all wooded land that they're not able to really utilize for anything. It would open the ability for them to utilize some of those parcels that they own, the 27 acres that they own there.
And tract of land in there that has a house, we don't know if someone lives or not. You haven't heard anybody from that family. I'm sure someone got a letter, but you haven't heard anything back from that family.
There's 2 houses in that area there. One is owned by the owner, by JGL LLC. And so we had not heard anything from them. One is owned by Miss Shamika Harris. She was notified directly by mail. And we have not heard of any comments from her.
All right. Any other questions before I open the public hearing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. All right, I'll open the public hearing to this request. Come forward, state your name and address so we'll have a record. And then try to keep your comments to say under 5 minutes so we aren't here to midnight or tomorrow morning. And if you happen to say something and the second person comes up and agrees, you can state that, but try not to repeat everything, okay? So everybody has a chance to talk. Who would like to be first? Don't all jump up at once.
Good evening. Can you guys see this? I don't know where to put this up so you can see it. First, thanks for the opportunity. There we go.
State your
First-
name and address.
Robert McGarvey, 19750 Dusty Hill Lane.
Thank you.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to present an opposition. My wife and I have property that directly touches this proposal. First off, Mr. Dean has been very helpful to us in trying to research this thing, but tonight he painted you a rosy picture. He did not list the nasties that this thing will allow as laundry cleaning plant, light manufacturing, labs of medical and pharmaceutical, auto assembly and auto paint. We're concerned about the chemicals that these people will regenerate. Tire recapping and vulcanizing, boat building, which is epoxies, and engraving and printing. All those produce some pretty nasty toxic chemicals. You guys got a tough job and responsible for promoting building, but you're also responsible for putting the brakes on ill-advised projects. You're the guardians of the community. You're stewards of public faith. I hope outside pressures don't keep you from making a good decision. A car with only a gas pedal and no brakes is dangerous. But I'm here tonight to tell you what a great job you guys do. I want to demonstrate the difference between one of your good decisions and this poor decision. So I'm going to use the Amelia commercial complex compared to this Emerson Antique Mall parcel we're talking about. The first consideration will be location, I assume. The Amelia Commercial Center, where they're adjacent to other commercial properties and other industrial properties, it matches existing zoning. There's nobody's dream homes back there. There's not a home in sight back there. So you got the green check mark on that one. That's a good job. However, at the Emerson Mall, it's surrounded by family homes. It currently has R3 zoning and wasn't mentioned tonight, but it also has a rural residence preservation cover on it. I'm not sure why they're flipping that off or not mentioning that. We should be pretty well blanket and covered. Then your next item would be the neighbors. At the Amelia Center, personal properties are not affected. There's no destruction of quality life. Noise pollution isn't an issue because nobody lives back there. And there's no one's scenic view impaired. The Emerson Mall, we have about $10 million worth of residential properties that will be impacted. Some of us will suffer major property devaluation. It will definitely have adverse effect on our quality of life. So, a red mark on that one. Traffic. The commercial center is serviced by a dead-end road. Only traffic back there are people associated with the industrial businesses. There is a traffic light in place already, so people from these businesses can enter and exit 360 safely. At the mall, 360 is traveled by everyone in Amelia County and other friends in Virginia. The applicant has not produced a traffic study, nor do they have a VDOT clearance. What if VDOT comes back and says there's too much in and out traffic, install a light so that people can enter and exit this property? Do we want another traffic light on 360? The environmental impact, the Commerce Center has no fragile waterways involved. As Mr. Dean said, this is a registered wetland. Runoff from hard surfaces can be contained back there. At the Emerson Mall, it's the headwaters of the Nibbs Creek. The Nibbs Creek is already on the EPA's impaired waterway list. An installation of an industrial park will only hurt an already bad situation. More hard surface runoff will occur. Then it's utilities available. The lease signage down at the Amelia Center boasts sewer, high-speed internet, and three-phase power. For the Emerson track, this is a big no-go. There is not an industrial sewer to treat industrial waste. All the waste from these products, these M1 users, will be serviced by a septic tank. The toxics can be corrosive and dissolve portions of septic systems, and they kill the good microbes that devour the waste, so it's treated. What it does do, these toxins, is it kills the microbes. Then you have a dead tank scenario where nothing's being treated. Basically, raw sewage is pushed out into the leach field and then drained into an already low water table in a fragile area. Also, our cell reception's out there, so the high speed won't work, and the power in West Amelia suffers frequent outages. I have a backup generator, my neighbor does. Most of my neighbors up there have backup generators. You're going to have a hard time pleasing leasees when you can't provide continuous cell or continuous power. Then there's a visibility impact. You guys did a great job back there. Put those buildings behind the food line, and you covered up that back of the food line with these buildings. And there's not much uglier than the back of a grocery store, except my mother-in-law's feet. The zoning, those are metal Spartan buildings back there. And in a commercial setting, industrial setting, that's just fine. It's 180 degrees at the Emerson Mall. Everyone in Amelia County travels through and will see the scar on the countryside. County pride is at stake. Cheap metal structures will look like cheap metal structures. Then there's a question of revenue generation. The county seems pleased with the commercial complex. I don't know their lease arrangements, but I go back there and see 8 buildings, 3 of them occupied. I don't know what that means, but that's what I see. The revenue that might be generated from the Emerson Mall is unknown because the applicant, EDA, hasn't submitted a cost versus revenue report, nor have they posted an environmental impact report, or have they studied the financial impact on the homeowners in the area. We are not opposed to industrial development in Amelia County. We just want it in an appropriate place. You don't put a toilet in the living room where everyone's got to look at it. You put it back in the bathroom, like you did at the Amelia County. It's not the zoning commission's job or burden to balance the county's budget. If it was, you guys would be deciding how many buses we buy, what we pay our county deputies and everything else. It's not your job. And you shouldn't be pressed to come to a decision about balancing the budget. You should judge this project on its own merits. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Come forward and state your name and address.
It's very short, but I wanted I'm Phyllis McGarvey, and my address is 19750 Dusty Hill Lane. I'm almost 70 years old, and I moved here from the city. And I moved to Amelia because it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I wanted to be in the country. I wanted to be somewhere peaceful where there's animals, and I can't even tell you how many birds I see on a daily basis, and the bees. And I've walked in that creek down below the property you're talking about. It's clear water, clear water. It's beautiful. Okay, that being said, that was kind of off the cuff. We are, as I said, new to the area. We moved here 6 months ago. The reason we moved here was, again, because of this beautiful country. Please don't build an industrial building complex at 360 and Richardson Road. I'm afraid it will set a precedent to build more industrial eyesores around our beautiful little country community. The future of our little community could be deeply jeopardized, and it could be your little community, your little neighborhood. Beautifying brings progress. Beautifying brings people. People want to live where it is pleasing to the eye and psyche. Please don't ruin the lovely rural aesthetics for the residents of the Richardson Road neighborhood and others that share the same lifestyle here in Amelia. Please don't contribute to the decline of our property values by visibly polluting the charm and desirability of our neighborhood. Imagine what you would feel driving onto Richardson, seeing this blot on the landscape next to your neighborhood. Would you approve of it? Were it by your home? Please don't pollute the water table. We are all on well water. Will your industrial park pollute our wells? How about the northern branch of Nibbs Creek at the back of the proposed property? The Nibbs Creek joins Flat Creek at Chula, then the Appomattox River to the James, and becomes part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. Please try to be sympathetic and maybe empathetic to our grievances and concerns, and we do the same for you. None of us want to live next to an industrial park. None of us. And I don't think anyone on the board wants that either. We all want our county to be successful and thrive. We all want that. With only 37.3 people per square mile in the county of Amelia, to put up an industrial park next to a rural residential area 3 seems a bit unnecessary and premature. Please give it more thought, and please vote no to changing the land west of Richardson and 360 from rural residential 3 to light industrial M1. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Janet Ely. I live at 19650 Dusty Hill Lane. I didn't come here with prepared notes tonight, but I think the two people that spoke before me did a very good job presenting how we feel about it. We moved here about 4 years ago to be in the county near our daughter and son-in-law and grandkids. I have 2 dogs. We walk them in the area. I enjoy the stars at night. I don't know what kind of light this industrial park is going to bring in, but the peace and the quiet and the neighbors, it's just such a nice, peaceful and serene setting. I too have concerns about pollution and just our quality of life there and our property value, and also the aesthetics or lack thereof that would come with this. So I too just ask you to please be sensitive to us that live in this residential area and think long and hard about rezoning this property. I do also agree, and maybe the county's already made the investment in the land, but I do also agree that there's got to be a better place that wouldn't impact homeowners like this property will, and also not be an eyesore on 360 as people drive through. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak? I want to give everybody an opportunity. You'll have tonight, and then whatever our decision comes, to be another public hearing before the board of supervisors. So we do not have a last say. We just have to make sure it meets certain regs. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing me.
Name and address.
Joseph Stranick, 8140 Richardson Road. Everybody here so far that has spoken has said pretty much everything that's on all of our minds. I have a document here from a meeting from this commission dated February 28th of 2022, and it references Article 8 of RR3 Rural Residential District. It says its intent of the district is expected to remain rural in character. How does an industrial park meet with that intent? It's also expected to absorb significant proportion of the rural residential increases. I understand that. There's other ways of going about this except using metal pole buildings with no utilities and no infrastructure. This county and this area in RR3 is geared towards rural residential neighborhoods. That's why I moved here. That's why many of these people moved here. It's probably why you live here. I don't think any of you live behind the food line. I don't think any of you would want to live behind the food line. I sure as hell don't. I don't want to see this. I don't know what it's going to do to our water table. It's already been spoken to. I can't even run a pressure washer without my pump shutting off. The water table's not there. Where's the septic system going? What's that going to do to our groundwater? What's it going to do to the ground? We have livestock. How's it going to affect them? I don't want you to vote and change the use of the land that's there now. The intent is to protect rural, agricultural, and forestal areas. That's your job, is to protect that. It's in your intent. That's all I'm asking you to do, is follow your intent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak? Anyone else like to speak?
Hi there, I'm Katrina Coleman Miller. My husband Daryl Miller. We live at 19701 Dusty Hill Lane, right off Richardson Road. We've been there since 2017. And just my comment, I concur and agree with everyone that what they have said. Living out there, I'm able to sit out on my back porch, just listen to the birds, just listen to peace. Without, even with the train going by, I can tolerate that, but you know, certain sounds you just want to keep and be at peace and at rest. So when my husband and I moved out, at my neighbor's yard, she has 2 apple trees. To see the deers come back every year with different fawns, a new set of fawns, is spectacular. You have turkeys, wild turkeys that's back there in the creek. They come up and it's like so many of them. And it's like, wow, it's amazing just to see it. I've been in the country all my life, and just not to see it up close was just a great experience for me. So I think the wildlife would be impacted. The deers, the turkeys, and all the wildlife that's out there, because they use that creek. And with the industrial park coming, I believe that I won't see that. I can't sit on my porch and I can't see it. And lastly, I do work in healthcare. Sometimes my shift varies, where I may have to work overnight. Will I be at home and this industrial park is there and I do hear some noise? Will it affect me? Probably will. So I just think it's something to consider. you know, families that are there. My neighbors, most of them are a lot older than my husband and I, you know, and it's just very peaceful just to have neighbors that don't make noise. And I don't make noise, so I don't want to have noise being made that will affect me and my family. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak?
Gentlemen. I'd like to thank y'all for this opportunity for everybody to come in front of you and air out their grievances about what's going on with the property next to the Dusty Hole Lane area.
Could you state your name?
My name is Mickey Myers, 19680 Dusty Hill Lane. I moved here about 3.5 years ago with my wife. We moved from West Virginia. The reason we picked this area is because it was a very nice country area. It was an area that provided peace and quiet, something that you can't get within city limits. Putting this industrial park where you're going to put it interferes with what our country living is about. And what I ask is that you just think about what you're doing to the area around that location. I know you've heard everybody here talk about, the birds and the deer and all kinds of things. I just ask that you think about what you're destroying by putting something like this in. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak?
My name is Thomas Mahler. I live at 19620 Maple Court. In 2005, my wife and I decided to move to me because of the beauty of it. We lived in Chesterfield. We were tired of the hustle and bustle and all the living in Chesterfield. We only go in there sometimes when we want to find a place to eat. But other than that, we stay here most of our time. And when we first moved out here, we got a realtor to check us out. He had several properties in the village itself. We chose not to live in the village because we wanted to have the serenity of living in the country. And we've been out there since 2005. This is 2023, 18 years. And the reason that's why we chose that area is because of the serenity of it. We like to keep it that way if that's all possible. And that's all I have to say. I'll be very brief about it, just like how I feel and my family feels.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Elisa Myers. I live at 19680 Dusty Hill Lane. I agree with everybody that's already spoken. I don't need to repeat all that. So most of what I have are just mostly questions. I know you can't answer all those now. I just would like that hopefully you can maybe answer these questions for us a little bit later in time. So my first question is why it's needed at all in general. Why it's even being requested, especially in the area that it's being requested at, which is zoned already as residential and as everybody stated is a rural area. I'm wondering who owns JGL LLC and why they're requesting it in this location at all. I want to know who is going to be benefited by this, who in the community, whether it's the immediate residents or anybody else in this county. I heard mention that somebody was sent a letter, the female that supposedly owns the house. I don't remember getting sent the letter either, and I'm also directly impacted by this. If letters were being sent, who's to say that she even received a letter? As we all know, the mail system isn't necessarily always reliable. So you might want to, I guess, just double check that the letters are being sent and they are being received, just before assuming that they're not. The statement is saying that it's low on the sight, sound, and smell, but low is not non-existent. and we already do hear sounds from the highway. So removing all of that barrier of those trees will also cause that sound on the highway to also escalate. So not only will we be getting extra sounds from the highway, but there will be sound, there will be smell, there will be sight. You can't not have any of that. My other questions, and I hope nobody takes offense to it, but I'm wondering if anybody on this board is going to be personally affected by this. I'm assuming most of you don't live in the immediate area where this is being built. If I'm wrong, please correct me on that, but from what I've understood, everybody that's spoken is going to be affected, but nobody making these decisions are actually being personally impacted by this. The other question that nobody will want to have me ask, but is anybody actually going to be benefiting from this financially? Because that's a question that I do have. I do respect all of you and the jobs that you do. And I know that you have hard decisions to make, and it's not easy making these decisions. But it is your job to make decisions that will benefit your community and your county. And I think we've hopefully all made it clear that this is not something that will benefit us as the residents in this area. So all I would ask respectfully is that you please don't let us lose faith in the job that you guys are doing by making a decision that we clearly do not want to happen here. It's been stated that there is already an area zone, M1, behind the food line area, so I'm not quite sure why that area is not being used further, as opposed to adding a whole new area where it's not wanted and will be more of an eyesore. So apologize if that's offensive or disrespectful in any way. I have no intentions of that being, but those are my questions. Again, I understand those can't necessarily all be answered today, but I hope that they are at least thought of and discussed. And if you could get back to us with some of those answers, I would love that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The industrial park right now is completely full. To answer one of our questions, the persons that get the letters is the property owners that actually touch the land that's being viewed at. That's it. That's two that I can answer right off. Others will have to get back to you. Anybody else like to speak? I don't want to cut it short, but we do have at least two more items that we have to discuss tonight. Anyone else like to speak before I close the public hearing? Like I said, there will be another public hearing, whatever our decision is when it goes to Board of Supervisors. We do not have the final say. We can put restrictions on this property. We can put limits and things like that. We can request things for the Board of Supervisors to think about. They have the final say. But in our motion, we can put a list of things that we'd like to be covered in their decision. Because we have to.
An opposition, sir.
This is the first we've heard it. We have 60 days to make them a comment, okay?
Thank you very much.
And any more questions? Any more like to speak before I close it?
I just emphasize one more. Please think.
We try to do that on every.
Well, it's the first board meeting I've ever been to. But I know I want to fight I want to fight properties, values, good, and my lifestyle. Good. I'm not using proper words, but you understand that.
Yes, ma'am. All of us want to do that. All of us have a different objective in life.
The restrictions, is that something you get public comment from? Or something?
Most of the time we pull it from what y'all's discussion is, concerns are. or concerns that we might have from other properties other than this that we've already dealt with in years past.
I think our main concern is the overall aesthetic. So you can restrictions that cover those items.
We don't. Well, I'm just saying, we can put restrictions, so. Anyone else like to speak before I close it? Come forward, state your name and address. If you haven't spoken before, we need all this to have it on record.
Bethany Stranick, 8140 Richardson Road. I just have a question that you might want to consider. If there's so much empty space in the existing light industrial behind Food Lion.
It's full.
Okay, I misunderstood what you said.
It is full right now.
If, should something like that be put where not everybody has to look at it? I mean, it's hidden behind Food Line right now. For this place, it's 157 acres they're proposing to make into an industrial. And it's right on 360 right there. I guess I'm done.
It's a lot of things you cannot put on the road. No matter where you build. I farm for a living, so I know what serenity is and open skies. If hearing no more on speak, I will close the public hearing and go back to the planning commission members. Y'all heard a lot from 9 residents. Have any questions, concerns? You want to hear Mr. Wilkerson on the VDOT?
Mr. Chairman, I think we got Mr. Barber too.
Oh,
Do you plan on speaking?
you like to speak, sir? Is he on?
I
Can you
just-
hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You want to
Okay.
speak?
I'm available to answer any questions that the planning commission may have. I'm Neil Barber. I serve as a consultant to the Economic Development Authority.
Anybody have any questions for him? What type of industries you kind of expect might look at this type of land? I mean, it's spaced out, a lot of trees in between the halls. It's pretty
That is
tough
correct.
ground.
There are some, topographic, characteristics of the property that have been reflected in the conceptual plan of development. But your question really relates to how could it be developed, and 2, what is the market that would be there, and 3 is what uses are permitted. The first, question in terms of the permitted uses are the M1 uses that have been sort of outlined. The second aspect is the topography, and like you said, there are certain areas that in the site that are really undevelopable because of the steep terrain, and thus the conceptual plan has sort of laid out the areas that are there. I would view the conceptual plan as a sort of a maximum development, since the conceptual plan did not take into consideration the location of the septic tank and drain field areas, which will reduce the amount of developable land. The third aspect of your question really is the marketability of the land. And there, it is not intended to be served with water and sewer has been identified. So more intense uses that would require water and sewer, such as food, often a lot of food processing facilities, as an example, require a lot of water processing. Those would not be types of uses that you would have there. I would suspect that you would tend to the uses that are looking for locations outside of Chesterfield where there's a higher cost of land and the availability of sites that are fairly larger in size are somewhat limited. I would expect that facilities that have requirements for outdoor storage would likely be attracted to the county for this property. The county administrator and the staff has indicated that over the last several years, there have been some companies that have inquired about location in the county, but have not been able to find a suitable site. Most of those did not require water and sewer central, but did require outdoor storage and larger sites. So other than that, I really don't have, any additional information regarding that question there. I hope I answered it sufficiently.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have questions for him? Or any,
Have you thought about, since this is going to be on the side of 360 and you're going to have neighbors, putting some sort of permanent natural screening that would, so people wouldn't have to look at the buildings and people going down 360 would not really notice it? I mean, is that possible to do something like that so it doesn't bother the neighbors?
There has been discussion at the EDA of, screening, and that's one of the reasons why they have limited access and development along the Richardson Road parcel. The northern part of the parcel, has been mentioned, is a sort of a natural ravine with a waterway there. And that provides a sort of a natural buffer between the more developable properties, which is a higher elevation along the roadway, than the back side of the property there. Some of the businesses that may be interested in the property would like to have and may need to have, ready access to the property road frontage. The conceptual plan indicates, that several parcels along the 360 having direct access. We did have a conceptual plan done prior to this one that had fewer access points along 360 and did have more of a central access road parallel to the frontage.
But if you're going to shave off the top of the hills and put buildings there, don't you think you need some screening taller than what is actually existing right now?
Sir, that would be, the process of looking at a more refined site plan and master plan of development, which the Economic Development Authority is planning to do, in future phases of consideration.
any other question?
So VDOT had recommended they recommend the traffic study, correct? In that they said they recommended that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morris. They recommended that.
Does are y'all planning on doing that? Getting one done?
The Economic Development Authority last year had applied to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership for what they call their Business Ready Sites program. The acquisition cost of the land can be used as a match for that grant. As a part of that grant application was the Master Plan of Development and Preliminary Engineering Report, soils analysis, wetlands determination, and the traffic impact study that was mentioned. All of those were there. In addition to that was what I would call some initial pre-development costs, such as the removal of the buildings that are there now, and a improvement of that area in, by the main entrance that come or crossover on 360, including signage as there. Because the property was not able to be closed and it was not zoned for industrial use, the application had to be withdrawn. There is the possibility that the EDA will reapply this year when those funds become available, which is anticipated in the May to June timeframe, with a final application likely due in the August timeframe there. So those detailed analysis, including soil studies, et cetera, would hopefully be included as a part of that grant.
Any other question? Any other questions? Comments? Suggestions? Pleasure. What do you want to do?
This conceptual plan right here would scare me if I lived in Dusty Hill. It was a maximum. It's not, it may not be realistic, but it's a maximum.
That's what you should see, the backs, for sure.
And the people right here invested everything they got.
Mr. Cumby,
Yeah.
could you,
I'm talking louder.
could you try to put the microphone up? They said they can't hear you in the back.
I'm talking for you, all right? I got a little sore throat and I ain't gonna scream. But these people here have invested everything they got. You can't retreat no further than your home. And I think that the EDA or IDA ought to have a little more realistic plan. I might talk to them. I mean, looking at this, you might be able to do more over here than right here around these people. That's just my thought. The county wants to know everything that's coming in. I think the homeowners might have a right that if they're joining, and you got a big metal building right in your backyard, I'd want to know. I see their point. I can see Amelia wanting a point of having an industrial park, and it is in a good location, but I think it's conceptual plan right here. They're trying to get everything they can get out of it, and they probably don't have a building leased at the moment. I think it needs to just be a little bit more. B&B probably drew this right here up, and didn't really take into effect this Dusty Hill subdivision, and that's their everything. And I'd like to see it. I'd like to see a conceptual plan with their.
Well, I guess
with their thought.
if they do the soil test and Perkins test, that would cut it back some, I'm sure. But I mean, that's one thing he was talking about that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that's, and do we have that as
I don't know
request
how to
before
word
we
it.
have?
I'm just looking at right here, Dusty Hill. I know Swift Creek, that's there, ain't caused no problem. They ain't caused no problem at all. But B&B, they're probably just done their job. You got the most amount they could get on it. And you got opportunity right now to where if you ever wanted to do another one of these things on down the road, probably ain't a perfect place for one of these things nowhere on 360, but we've got to put businesses on 360. There's a prime example right here where these people right here they done sunk their everything into their homes. And it's right there at them. They want just a little bit of say so of maybe what a building looks like.
Yes.
I don't know how to word that. But I ain't saying I'm against it. I ain't saying I'm against it. But I'm saying that the people, these landowners right here, they just got some concerns about their house. And right now it's a time to maybe the EDA and them could talk. But I don't know how to word it.
Maybe some more setbacks.
Something that, I don't think it's something we can answer. I think it's something that the people that are trying to buy the property from the county. And these people on that hill right there, they're very well worked out. Man back there said, you know, he don't, metal building's one thing, but a pretty brick building's something else. You know? That they're asking, please, ain't it? Gus. I'm gonna just stop talking.
Any other concern, comment?
I mean, I kind of.
I mean, we've got
agree
this,
with
but
you.
we still got a lot of ifs
Right.
on this plan.
I'd like to see something a little more detailed about aesthetics of it. So it doesn't look bad to the people visiting through up and down 360 and for the people who live there. Maybe some screening restrictions or larger setbacks against current residential property or something. I mean, some sort of buffer protection.
The only people that are talking are people got the home. You can't go no further than your home.
Anyone else have comments?
The fewer access points there are from 360 is very important because of the amount of traffic. It's not going to be getting any less. And so that is a major thoroughfare. And so I was disappointed when I heard they had a plan that had less access, and they came out with something with more.
Part of it is like the 360 corridor is where the development's supposed to be, like according to the comprehensive plan, right?
Yes, sir. As Mr. McGarvey mentioned, the future land use map breaks the county down into development areas. And if you look at the future land use map, really only the village is considered a development area, but then so this area is in the rural preservation area, but then the comprehensive plan also, and it's like layers, also says that future growth should occur along the 360 corridor. And it even mentions like the Jetersville village area and all the way up and down the county, that future growth should be channeled through to properties that abut 360. So, Mr. Barney, you're correct. It's in that future growth area, but it's also layered with Mr. McGarvey's comments. He's correct that right now everything mostly in that area is still in a rural preservation setting.
And it's supposed to be a mix of residential and commercial property too.
Down 360. Yes, sir. Yep.
360 corridor.
Yeah, on the 360 corridor. Yes, sir. Is a mix of development is what the county's comprehensive plan promotes.
Any other comments? Questions? A lot of questions.
I'll echo, Richard's comments. I think, we need some development. County needs it. We need the income. But I think some planning needs to be done on the aesthetics and some of the setbacks for the residential and some screening back there. I mean, I'm not opposed to this, but I do think I've got some questions about the aesthetics of it and some setbacks for the people that are going to be directly impacted as neighbors.
I'm assuming most of those that spoke tonight are in the piece that touches Richardson Road, right?
Off of Dusty Hill Lane was most of the individuals that spoke.
Come up and visit us.
Any more questions? Concerns? You want to table it?
I don't know what to say. I just keep looking at this conceptual plan. You,
We require 1,000-foot setbacks on a solar farm and it doesn't make any noise.
I know B and B did.
You know what I'm saying?
It showed you what the potential was, but sometimes you can't go off of the potential. I mean,
They don't make noise, but they're not real great to look at either.
Aesthetically pleasing.
But,
Is there an opportunity to get some different options for conceptual plan and look at some of the setback?
Brady?
So the issue with the way development works is zoning is your first step in every project. The problem with getting zoning approval is really we all, as residents of the community, want as much information as possible. But there's certain things that you just can't get done, like groundwater surveys and all these things, unless
It's all right.
the zoning box is checked. And that's where you see in every development projects like that, and y'all have had that frustration where there's that level. And so I believe that you guys, of course, could defer it, and the EDA will meet, and we could see if the EDA, when the EDA meets again, if they'd be willing to put in a conceptual site plan that addresses any of the neighbors' concerns in terms of setbacks or buffers or all those things. But at the end of the day, that's still going to be a conceptual site plan, meaning it's not until they go in and work with the Department of Health and work with DEQ and work with VDOT and identify where they can really utilize the property and spend tens of thousands of dollars in that development review process that they will know exactly what they can do in terms of location and where they're going to build out the site. Now, setbacks and aesthetics and stuff like that, the board can put those reasonable conditions, right? And say, regardless of what the concept is, we want you to adhere to the setbacks of the district plus an additional 100% or 200%. You know, the board, the planning commission can recommend those reasonable conditions, and the board could put that. But I just don't know if there's going to be, I don't know if the planning commission is going to be happy with a plan. And I can't say that the developer at the time, being the EDA as the owner, can guarantee that, hey, this is exactly what we're going to do without going through the layers that they need in the development review process. And you guys understand that well.
I think whether it can be done within the comprehensive plan and everything else is kind of maybe our question. Where maybe where they should be done, maybe is the boards, what they think.
Well, what do you want to do? I mean, VDOT's going to have to, I think they're going to pretty much need a study for that, for sure. Because even one entrance or crossover, I don't know if that's going to work. Not in what you see here.
Traffic light.
Either somebody, well, I don't like traffic lights, but it's better than getting somebody killed. But I mean,
I like to just see a big buffer for Dusty Hill. A big one.
well, I mean, you want to see what, table it and see what EDA would come back for a buffer. We can make, if we got solar farms 1,000 feet,
It might not have nothing in this one set up right now, but it'll fill up one day and then we'll go to another. If they burn their bridge on this one, the next one will be harder. So I think they need to work with neighbors because the county needs to get on. My thought.
well, we tried that with solar farm too.
I think we're gonna get a report back from VDOT too, before we move forward with this and see if it's even feasible.
Well, you want to put that in form of motion? We'd like to hear a report from VDOT and,
Mr. Chairman,
and EDA.
so VDOT did provide all the comments they could provide up to this point, and except for the recommendation of a traffic impact statement. And Mr. Wilkerson can speak to just what that would look like if you guys want to hear what that would look like. So since it's not a required one, like the item that was removed from the agenda this evening, it's a recommended one. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Wilkerson?
Yeah, so the state regulation is pretty clear that the department can only require a traffic study for a rezoning case that generates more than 5,000 new trips per day. So when we looked at what the development was proposed, we came with about 4,000. And like I said, that's just based on the ITE trip generation manual and an assumed land use code, since all we had to do was use the information in the application. So at a minimum, if there is no traffic study provided, when the applicant submits a site plan, we're going to require turn lane warrants at every commercial entrance to the site. And because 360 is such a high volume arterial, we would expect right turn lanes for all the right in, right out entrances and an improved left turn lane at the crossover for the full access to the site off of 360. If there is a traffic study provided, then we do have a format for the state required traffic studies. We'd recommend that the applicant follow. Be more than happy to work with them on scoping that study. But basically, we want to see them project the traffic the site's going to generate, distribute it onto the network, which is going to be 360, and then just look to see what other improvements are needed. The other point I want to make is I've heard a few folks talk about traffic signals. US 360 is on the arterial preservation network. So the state has designated it as a critical highway for state travel. So there's a higher threshold to get a traffic signal warranted. Well, not warranted. The warrants are in the, it's a federal standard in the MUTCD, but there's a signal justification report process that has to be followed if a signal is warranted, to look at some other innovative intersection treatments to determine what the best traffic control for that intersection would be. So for instance, if a signal warrant was provided and the department agreed that it was met, we would then have a separate report that would need to be done to determine what that treatment would be. But if there are any other specific questions about traffic, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Is it enough land between the two lanes there for right and left turning? Between the lanes of 360 there.
In the median?
In the
At
median.
crossover, yes, sir. Yeah, so that would be the location where that full access is. And I did not get a chance to look to see if there's an existing left turn lane. That would be for eastbound 360.
No.
So we would at site plan, we would likely require a full left turn lane. So for that speed, the minimum would be a 200-foot storage, a 200-foot taper. But if we had specific traffic data, there are ways to calculate what that storage needs to be.
In your 4,000 vehicles per day, how many did you calculate about how many you think would be tractor and trailers making deliveries and stuff like that?
No, sir, we did not. That was just an average daily estimate using the ITE formula. But that's
like a lot of vehicles use one crossover.
Mhm. Yes, sir.
That'd be my concern. It's the slower loaded trucks trying to get in there and blocking the 360.
Mhm.
The other areas they'll pull right out in front of you and block the road. You got to stop to let them finish turning. I mean, it's
Mhm.
situations.
Mhm.
Any more questions, Mr. Wilkerson? Appreciate all you do.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I know DEQ is gonna be heavily involved because of the grades, because of the waterways. They're not gonna let anything dump into them.
Oh, no. I know what DEQ does.
I bet you do now.
Getting worse. But, no, DEQ is very, very, very tight, very tight. As far as groundwater and runoff and things like that. Now, as far as buffer and things like that, they don't say much there, but they are tight on anything to do with water quality. And any runoff for sure. I get that all the time from them, but,
Do we have any recommendations on aesthetics on buildings that go, or businesses that go right inside of 360? I mean, I know we've got recommendations for townhouses, everything up there, all that, but has there been anything done for a business on 360?
I thought we had some stuff set in this zoning and stuff about setbacks and screening and stuff like that, I thought.
not for businesses that I know of. Do you?
There's a 360 overlay district that,
I know they have to be some type of
right.
thing in front of them.
Mhm. There's a 360 overlay district, which is for any property abutting 360 that has a series of provisions. I can't quote them all.
I know the
to-
sign can only be so big.
Right. And the setbacks are more so, like even if it's
Parking lot
B1,
has to
right.
be a certain distance back off the
Mhm.
road, and I do remember that, and I think
It was
part of the
25-foot screening area or something, I think.
somewhat, but they had to be low screens so they could see, I think. I don't think it could be huge trees.
Off the top of my head.
So there are some already set requirements that they'd have to meet one way or the other. What's your pleasure? I mean, we haven't had it. Y'all haven't had that long. I have had a couple more weeks before y'all had it. Few of us did, because we were talking about the zoning on this and some other projects that's going to come before us yet. So we have a little bit of, but only maybe a couple weeks. We'll table it for 30 days or till next meeting. See if
I'll move to defer it to the next meeting so we get a chance to look over this, come up with some recommendations on setbacks and aesthetics and that type of thing.
a motion's been made and second to further for,
Is that Mr. Whittington on the second?
no.
No, Mr. Whittington, sorry.
I would like to know what the setback is on this right now. On the conceptual, if you have an idea.
I can tell you the M1, it's not far.
No, I'm talking about.
Oh, what they have proposed in the conceptual
You look at
plan?
that, I don't know what that distance is.
Yes,
there.
sir.
I mean,
200, 300 feet. I can
you
tell.
think that's 200 feet?
At the most, I think, some of it.
All right.
I think you need to look at increasing the setback off the stream and off the neighborhood and having some sort of screening so that people that already live there don't look at it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in favor of the deferral because there's problems on both sides of the property. And there also needs to be time for digesting the public input that has occurred here tonight, both on the part of the applicant here, but also for others. So in the interest of being presented an improved conceptual plan, I'm in favor of the motion as presented.
More discussion on the motion. Anything else you want to try to find answers to? I mean, we've heard some comments. We'll see what we can do to get a few of those answers. But it goes back to, it takes a lot of money to get some things, and you can't spend the money if you don't have it, and then it turns right around and doesn't go in your direction. We've seen that in other projects come before us. A motion been made in second, here no more discussion. All in favor of the motion to defer it till our next meeting, and hopefully we can get a little bit more insight, digest this, and maybe go down there and drive through the residential section and see what it looks like. After we see this conceptual plan, we ride in there. I know it's a rolling tract of land to row cropping, and they have been row cropping. I'd say they probably put as much sediment in the creek as industrial park will do when you row crop. But, all in favor of the motion, make it known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll have it as old business next month. And hopefully, if anyone has a question that comes up after they digest it, what we've heard tonight, or from what we see, certainly let Brady know, or myself know, or someone in the county administration office know, so we can try to find an answer or question.
And Mr. Chairman, if anybody here or anybody tuning in online has any questions for me, I know last Monday I met with Mr. McGarvey for 30, 45 minutes and we've corresponded. I'm more than willing to meet with anyone in person. You don't have to schedule an appointment. You can come by anytime. You can review all the information that I have, review all the materials. I'll answer any zoning related questions, as that's what I cover for the county. So please feel free to reach out as needed, and we're willing to answer any questions we can.
Thank you for everybody coming. All right, moving on. We've got more Two more public hearings yet. Number 3, the zoning text amendment, wireless support structures.
Might as well wait a minute.
I don't guess I'll speak in the mic, can Well, the worst part, they clear cut that thing. They clear cut that whole tract of timber. Pretty sure it's clear cut on the back. But I mean, it's already killed it. That's too far looking out.
I mean,
Huh?
that property, they put the timber off on it, so. So see, the fields on top of the hills, but there's no timber around the over areas.
Well, and you have timber in your hollows, because you can't cut hollows if it got water in it.
There you got a building at elevation of 50 feet and timbers at elevation of 30 feet.
All right, moving on to the next public hearing, the zoning text amendment, for wireless support structures. You want to take that, Brady?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So this amendment would increase the flexibility of the provisions. Sorry. Yes, sir. So this amendment would increase the flexibility of the provisions governing wireless support structures. As it stands, I'll read you guys the existing setback or existing requirements. Right now, in terms of setbacks, which is what this amendment would impact, a wireless support structure shall be set back from any property line a distance equal to 120% of the height of the wireless support structure. And in no event shall any such wireless support structure be constructed or erected nearer than 120% of the height of a wireless support structure to a residential dwelling unit located on the same property, or 120% of the height of the wireless support structure, or 500 feet, whichever is greater, to any residential dwelling off premises. So basically, right now, our zoning ordinance requires any wireless support structure, the property it's on has to have 120% of the setbacks, 120% of the height for a setback, excuse me. If it's located to on a property adjacent to a property that has a residential dwelling, it's either 120% or 500 feet from that setback, whichever is greater.
Is that 500 feet from the
That's
building or from the line?
That's 500 feet. I'll read it. All right, or 120% of the height of the wireless support structure, or 500 feet, whichever is greater to any residential dwelling off premises from the wireless support structure. So it's a little weird. The way I would interpret it is 120% is the setback, 500 feet is from a neighboring dwelling.
Neighbor's house.
Neighbor's house is the way I would interpret
I
it.
agree.
So not 500 feet from the property
Okay.
line. The amendment would increases the flexibility, and I'll read you what the amended text would read. And this is included in your agenda packet, and the amended text is highlighted in red. It would say all wireless support structures shall be set back from any property line a distance equal to 120% of the height or the distance of the fall zone as certified by a registered professional engineer licensed in Virginia. So what this would do would allow for an applicant that is constructing a wireless support structure in excess of 80 feet. It would allow them to either meet the 120% setback. So for an 80-foot structure, that'd be 96 feet. So they could meet the 96 feet or whatever the fall zone is as certified by a registered professional engineer licensed in Virginia. So what this amendment really does is provides an or that allows them to submit third-party stamped certification that this structure would fall within a respective boundaries.
If I may, I've talked to some people about some of this. The new style towers, and what makes it so pertinent is this new radio system the county's getting ready to put in. These new style towers are designed not to fall over like that. They're designed to fall and collapse in on themselves, so that the fall zone is much, much smaller than what the height of the tower is. And they're designed like that. And I talked to Brady about it. If the engineer is willing to certify that's the fall zone, it's going to be his problem if it doesn't work right. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
if he's going to certify it. And so it's but that's the thing is that the new towers are built totally different, so they don't fall out. They kind of just fall in on themselves.
Well, I would hope that if he's certified that it wouldn't be a house
Well,
in 96 feet.
so
just on the safe side.
What's not changed, and I want to make that note, is if you look at item 3 under setback, so number 3 under setback, it's not suggested that be amended, which is the 500 feet to a residential dwelling.
Yeah.
Because I know that someone living on a property, 500 feet seems far, but really isn't far to be looking at a huge tower. So that was not amended. The planning commission, of course, could recommend to amend that, and we could adjust that before the board. But as staff, we didn't include that in this amendment. One additional thing that was included, other than the fact that the certification has to be filed with the community development department at the time of site plan review. So right when they submit their site plan, they would have to also submit that certification. Is this provision that says the governing authority, which would be the Board of Supervisors, may reduce or waive the standard setback requirements when considering factors such as a substantial stand of vegetation being preserved within the setback from the property line / fall zone and or relevant topographic factors that would impact the potential fall zone. So, of course, depending on the topography of the area and depending on what vegetation is surrounding it, the board could look at that and adjust setbacks based on, an applicant making a claim one way or the other. But of course, this is all going to rely on a certification from a third-party engineer that's licensed in Virginia to stamp something and say, this is going to fall where I say it's going to fall.
Have any questions for Brady?
You're exactly right, Dave. We put up one at the Lunenburg courthouse. It's less than 40 feet away from the sheriff's department courthouse, 180 feet tall. I asked the same question, if it falls, ain't it gonna fall on the building? And they said it's supposed to collapse.
Right into
Just like what you said.
It collapse on itself or something.
I mean, it's close to the courthouse and the sheriff's department, 40 feet.
Huh. Any more comments before I open up for public hearing?
Well, the only thing about the residents, I mean, it would be kind of obnoxious maybe to have a, flashing light, coming in your bedroom window at night. So I think that, maintaining that kind of
Well, that
distance is good, but
kind of covers it in there. Any other comments before I open up for a public hearing? All right, I'll open up the public hearing to discuss the zoning text amendment for the wireless support structures. Anybody like to speak? Come forward, state your name and address. Seeing no one and hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. What's your pleasure, commission members, on this amendment change
Well, with it saying that the engineer.
or rezoning?
Saying that the engineer has to certify the fall zone, kind of takes the liability off of our lap. I make a motion we approve it as it's presented.
A motion been made and second. You either put Morris or Whittington for second it. Any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, make a note by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, the third zoning text amendment, it's a dog kennel definition. I think it's almost in the back of your packet.
Yep. Very last page.
You want to speak to this, Brady?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. So currently, there's not a zoning exception in the ordinance for individuals that do not run a kennel but may breed a family dog or household dogs once or twice a year and generate more than the $2,500 of gross receipts that the county would then require that individual to get a business license. So when an individual is required to get a business license, they have to come in and get zoning compliance. And when they come in and get zoning compliance, I have to ask them, well, what are you doing? And most of the time they meet me in person and I sit down with them. Well, when they're breeding dogs, the definition we have in our ordinance that would address that or fit that is a dog kennel, because they're breeding dogs. And as the definition reads, it's a place designed to house, board, breed, handle, or otherwise keep or care for dogs 4 months old or older for sale, for sale or in return for compensation, and which requires a business license to be obtained from the Commissioner of Revenue. So since they're breeding dogs and handling them or keeping them, even though they're doing it in their house, so it's not necessarily place designed, when they're doing it for sale and it then activates the requirement for a business license, they're then classified as a kennel. So once you cross that threshold and you have to get a business license, you now have to be addressed as something in our zoning code. And this is the only thing we have zoned. So if someone was selling a dog or a few puppies and didn't cross that threshold to need a business license, this wouldn't apply to them because they would never come before me. If people are keeping hunting dogs, they're not selling them, they're not needing a business license, they're not going to come before me. It's only when someone has a certain dog, a bunch of chihuahuas for sale, and they're over that $2,500 gross receipt and they have to then pay taxes on that income to the locality, that they would then come to me and I have to classify them as something. And right now, as our ordinance stands, we only have this use dog kennel, and it's only allowed via special exception in some districts. It's not allowed in RR3 at all. So this amendment would allow for individuals that have litters of three or fewer litters in a calendar year to operate under a home occupation use. So when they come in to get their license from me,
That's not what it says. It says to have fewer than 3 litters.
three or few.
That means 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, individuals that have fewer than 3 litters. And I might have meant to write that 3 or fewer. So I will say that that was a mistake on my side. I meant to write it 3 or fewer.
I like it the way it's written.
But what I'll need to check is how it was advertised, and I can check that real quick if it was 3 or fewer. I can go in there and look, but what they would be able to operate under the home occupation use. Okay.
Any questions?
But I'm going to check
Brady?
that real quick on my email.
No, I like it the way it's written, though. They can only do 1 or 2 groups. I mean, it's not gonna take long to reach $2,500. Lab puppies, registered lab puppies, anywhere from $500 to $800 a piece. It don't take a couple puppies to get $2,500.
I agree with Roy. I think 2 enough, 2 is enough.
1 or 2 is fine, because people do that in their household, but when you get to 3 or more, I think you need to get a kennel license.
Yeah. All right, I have a question for you. Suppose you
Yeah.
have 2 dogs.
Huh?
Suppose you have 2 dogs. That means each can only have 1 litter? Or
No,
if you
you
had,
can have a litter for each one of them.
but you have 2 litters for each one of them?
No, you can't have 2 litters for each one of them. 1 litter.
I'm just asking.
Set them up in there and eat.
This is just for profit, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
The way I advertised it was an amendment to Article 2 of the Amelia County zoning ordinance to revise the definition of kennel to include a provision for home-based breeders that have 3 or fewer litters of puppies. So I did put 3 or fewer in the advertisement. But if you guys wanted to make it, if Roy wanted to suggest and you all wanted to suggest it be
Like
fewer than
this?
3, it could. I advertised it as 3 or
I
fewer.
mean, I think if you keep it down to 1 or 2, then people can do that and make a little money off their dog, but it kind of eliminates these puppy mills and stuff like
Yeah.
that people are doing behind the scenes and in garages and stuff like that.
I mean, is 3 litters a year gonna be a puppy mill?
No, well, not necessarily. Well, 10 per litter, if you, all of them survive, yeah. It's getting there.
I mean.
Might be pigs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, if it's advertised as 3 or fewer, I don't really see the difference between, I mean, in a year, whether you have 3 litters or 2 litters.
You raise dogs? I mean, I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's gonna, will it affect you?
Oh, you mean to sell?
Yeah.
Heck no, heck no. I mean, I have dogs, but, no.
I got one, but he's bigger, but he maybe.
Yeah, no, I just mean it's advertised as 3 or fewer.
We
Well,
talked,
2 or 3. No,
we talked about this in the zoning meeting. It gives the people the opportunity to breed 1 litter and maybe have an accident breed. And hopefully they learn about a 3rd one, how to prevent that, but it gives them some leeway.
Right, yeah, I mean, I don't have a dog in the fight, but.
So what's your pleasure?
I think if you have 3 litters in a year, that's 1 every 4 months. That's kind of like a
Puppy
yeah.
mill. Yeah.
So,
I think 1 or 2. Anything more than 2, y'all.
potential 1 accident, you can,
Yeah,
that'll be 2.
yeah. This is for profit, not personal.
I understand.
It's a lot of money. And that's puppies.
Well, you want to leave it like it's printed in our literature?
Yeah.
I think, so. I mean, for me personally, I think so. What does everybody else think?
Yeah.
All right, it's a motion,
Or 2 or less.
motion. Oh, I got to get the public hearing before we get any,
Yeah.
excuse me. Any more discussion before I open the public hearing? Might have somebody really anxious back there to speak. I'll open public hearing for the definition of the kennel. Anybody like to speak? Go ahead.
Shelby Rogerbell, 9830 Knoxville Lane. So I am a board member of Morgan's Mutt's Rescue. So this is perfect. Please stop letting these people breed dogs because they end up in the shelter here. They end up in the shelter here and this is our tax money. So I understand a reputable breeder, but that's not what the shelter is dealing with. And that is not what I've got a foster dog at home now. So yes, if you can minimize how many times they can breed without being held accountable with the business license or restrictions, please, for the love of God, do it. Because it stays here. This is a law you're talking about for right here. And these dogs are going to our shelter. And, it's already limited at how much money that we can spend at the shelter as it is. They're going on donations for food. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate it.
Thanks for your comments. Anyone else like to speak? Seeing none, hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. Now, what's your pleasure? As what printed or as what advertised?
I'd make a motion that as is presented in this, as is printed.
All right, the motion been made in a second.
2 or less.
Motion made in second. Any more discussion?
So what will occur procedurally is I'll still advertise it as it was advertised, but it'll be the planning commission's recommendation to the board that it's approved as
As
written
is.
here.
Yeah.
Okay. So that way we. good
That way,
legal-
when it goes to board of supervisors to okay it one way or the other,
Right.
they know what our recommendation is and what was actually
But because
mailed
it
out.
was advertised there, we have to.
stay the same.
Yes, sir.
I mean, basically, if they do more than 2 litters a year, they'd have a kennel license.
Exactly. Well,
That's all-
they'd have to have a special exception
Yeah.
Okay.
permit. The kennel license is separate because that's just to reduce the amount you're paying for tags if you have over a certain number of dogs. Right. Yep. So this requires an actual special exception use authorization if you were to go over that 2 litters a year.
It'll work.
Any more discussion on the motion? I do have a second, right? Yep. Okay, 3-4 second. All in favor of the motion, make a note by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Anyone else have any other thing pressing them this evening? the Board of Supervisors did approve the last zoning request from a month ago. I'm assuming we'll probably have another public hearing next month on that digester. Right now, it's looking at having a public meeting, maybe the second week in April. Probably in this area. For anybody that wants to know more about the digester. I just want to fill you in on that. But other than that, I appreciate everybody coming out. Let's go home and digest what we've heard. We had a lot of good speakers. And we'll come back next month and hopefully we can have a few answers.